Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
So
impressed though with some of the ideas. I'm like, whoa, that's so cool.
yeah, that's great. So now McKenzie, you're hanging on here. How you doing?
Good. Just was catching up with the group that I was working with on their idea and just trying to figure out some tools and stuff that we could use. So I've never done wireframe mocks before, but I work with them pretty closely when with my with the team I work on at Target. So was showing them examples of how I use wireframe mocks and the level of detail that we have working with those. So we were trying to download, one of them had used the design application before, Adobe XD, but she's having issues downloading it. So I just found like a free like wireframe site where we could just really generically build out how the page would look. And then we kind of created a Google Doc to like talk about what each of the things would do and just kind of aggregate that information there. So just going, just spitballing ideas and trying to build on the one that they're talking about. So that's cool.
Yeah, thanks for being involved. I love your background.
Oh yeah, and I always love having Mordor in the background. I like it's always fun. It's so opposite how I actually feel. So I'm always just like, it's just such a funny background to have.
Right. Yeah.
I actually had a really weird interaction with this. My church does like Zoom calls, and I decided to join it one day because I don't really like excited. I don't live in my hometown, but it's like the church I grew up with, like going to. I called in and somebody was like, "Oh, is that supposed to be like a joke? Like it's supposed to be like hell or something?" And I'm like, "Oh no, it's Lord of the Rings. I'm not trying to be like messed up or weird, like joining." I'm like, "No," I'm like, it was some like older lady, and I was like, oh. I was like, "No, I'm not trying to be funny and like weird. I'm like, it's just Lord of the Rings. It's from work. I don't change my Zoom background, so sorry about that."
Yeah.
Very funny.
Right. So how long you been at Target?
It's been 3 years now. Yeah, I joined 2017. Technically a little longer than that because I did an internship the summer before.
Got it.
So like it's been like a year or 3 years and maybe like 3 months or something.
Yeah. Was that your first job out of college or no?
I've been kind of just working since I was like 14, so I've always had a job, but pretty much it was my first, I guess, job in my field, like applying it. Because I was a TA in college for computer science, and then I did a research internship through Sandia Labs, just doing some like creating tools for the scientists to use, like just libraries for compiling tool data, like if they were taking measurements, and it's like, oh, we can compile that using some C++ measurement library, I don't know, just stuff like that. And then I got to do the internship where I could actually work computer science stuff. I could say like, oh, my first software engineering job. So
Where'd you grow up?
Montevideo, Minnesota, so western Minnesota.
You're a local kid.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I think it's kind of funny that actually at Target, I feel like there's like a lot more people who are from out of state than here. So I thought that was kind of funny that I work with actually more people that aren't from here.
Right.
So everyone loves to joke about my accent, which I didn't really notice I had one until I started working with people outside of Minnesota.
A different place.
I can hear it now.
Because they pointed out, right?
Yeah, and they're like, oh, because it's like a joke. We're like, oh yeah, like like people make that joke, but I actually just sit there and say that. I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, and they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Busted.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, there it is.
Well, that's cool. Well, a pleasure to meet you. I'm the director of IT Career Pathways for Minnesota State.
Nice.
IT Center of Excellence. And so this program is, something that we're engaged with, and we're grateful to have people like Katie and you and others who are just kind of taking it on and coming in and working with these young women.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where is that located out of, the Minnesota?
Well, we're all of these centers of excellence are hosted out of a particular institution. In our case, it's Metropolitan State.
Okay.
Out of St. Paul, and they've got campuses, elsewhere. But when pre-COVID, was the Midway. Now it's
Yeah.
out of my basement, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
good.
just hang out with my circuit board here.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Like the
So,
background.
yeah. So thanks for being involved. And how did you get recruited into this? Did Katie recruit you or did someone
Yeah.
else? Did she?
Yeah. Yeah. Because Katie, you were interning, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a bit of a stinker. She's stirring it up out there. We love that part.
Oh,
Right.
that's good.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming where you came from, McKenzie, that there weren't many students like you who,
Yeah.
were involved
weren't.
in, yeah,
That's when one of my biggest like long-term goals is looking at like rural areas and how you can get computer science into the curriculum,
right,
because there's a lot of students that go into technology and hardware, but it's more at an agricultural or like mechanical engineering
makes sense.
level, like auto mechanics, and a lot of
Yeah.
farmers come out of rural areas, which is
Yeah.
those are great careers and that's where they should be. But a lot of the hardware they now work with is very like digitalized and
Yeah.
driven by software, and
Right.
it's a gap in a lot of that where it's like, oh, I'm going to become an auto mechanic, but basically my whole job is plugging something
Really?
in and reading
Right.
code, and I don't know
Right.
what this means. I can fix a car, but I can't fix these cars. Or same with there's like a whole controversy around right to repair with tractors and things like that because of technology and like intellectual property around software. So you can't just fix your John Deere tractor on your own right now. And that's mostly because people don't really have the knowledge to make those fixes. So they're like, please don't go to a retailer and go get it fixed there, which I think is kind of a wild thing. And I'm like, it's crazy. But it's nice to live near the metro now, or in the Twin Cities, I guess, and so many more opportunities for students at a young age to get involved in technology, especially since it's just such a big part of our lives. It's cool to see people making apps when they're in like 8th grade, and I'm like, nice. Whoa. Super cool. I'm like, I learned how to type until I was in like 11th grade, so
I was in the keyboarding class, right?
Yeah. I was lucky because my dad was like a hobby programmer. When he was growing up, his math teacher helped him get a computer, and like he's super into like programming his own like choose your own adventure D&D campaigns, and and so when I was a kid, we'd play around with making my own flashcards, which is hilarious because if I made them wrong, I was learning wrong. Like, oh, I'll make my flashcard like multiplication table stuff, and then they'd be like wrong. We're like, no, that's you made a wrong flashcard and stuff. But he is really into like hobby programming, so it's something where I'm like, I'm aware of it, I just don't have any means to learn it yet. So college was my first introduction to computer science.
Where did you go to school?
St. John's University, or St. Ben's.
Yep, very familiar.
Yeah.
My daughter was a freshman at St. Ben's, and it wasn't quite her thing. She ended up at St. John's, or I should say lacrosse.
Oh yeah.
And that worked. She hadn't finished up her time there, but we were on campus at St. Ben's there. Moved her in. In fact, she's got a close friend that's still from college there, right, from her freshman year.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, quick question: you made a comment about your desire to help rural communities like your school to be exposed to computer science or technology education. I wanted you to know that we have a free curriculum called IT Exploration that exposes them to just a wide spectrum of technology jobs and gives them sort of an introduction to those careers, and then also obviously skills, right? What are those kinds of skills? And then it's really targeted to places like rural Minnesota, and to communities that aren't very steeped in technology, right? Because there's a lot
Yeah.
of suburban areas in Minnesota, you know, that, you know, there's 5 or 6 or more courses, you know, that someone can experience. But in a lot of places, there's nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Which that's basically where I came from. Like we have like physics and chemistry, which I'm like,
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. But the fact that no one even knows that there's an AP computer science test you can take at a high school level kind of
right,
blows my mind. Where it's like, oh, that exists, and people can learn about that, and
right.
that there's just such a gap. And like same with robotics, like I think that was probably one of the most mind blowing things. Is there's a whole like the first robotics, kids start that in like middle school and up, and that's a thing that anyone can do and sign up for and have at their school. And
Yeah,
it's just something that was never introduced like where I'm at to this day. Like I have a couple friends who are teachers where I grew up, and I think they're talking about getting a robotics teacher involved in the school so that they can do a first robotics group there. But that is a tough, like, I mean, to find people to do that and then try to start out a branch of computer science learning in a rural area. It's like you're just introducing a whole curriculum basically.
yeah, yeah. No, Katie, that was kind of warms your heart, doesn't it, with the robotic side of this, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was in robotics in high school, and that was really amazing. My team, I don't know, I think 7 years ago or so, Egan didn't have a computer science program at all. So the team actually was the one who like got computer science classes going and stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and you
but
had a
yeah, no, that's
Well, and
yeah,
you had someone from industry come in, and George, you know, Egan High School, I think, I'm trying to think, George, his last name, Benke, who worked at where I think he worked at Thompson or
Oh yeah.
somewhere, and came in and started advising with your, you know, some of your teachers to just help them learn how to teach computer science, right? But that's what it takes. But anyway, I wanted you to know, McKenzie, if you're ever interested in seeing this curriculum, it's pretty amazing, and it's no cost to schools. And we've got more and more adopters coming on. We just had a training yesterday with, you know, about 20 people from different places in Minnesota. So every day we're picking up new people. And it's so engaging and interactive. It's on an incredible platform that's offered by STEMFuse. And they've got a lot of curriculum, Katie, in the area of robotics and gaming, and all that stuff is costs. But we ended up saying, no, we want to create a curriculum that's no cost, because that is an obstacle right there. Right?
Yep.
that's awesome.
Got to charge somebody for it. There's a lot of people, a lot of schools that can't afford to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Stretched super thin. For
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that like that's just like a normal conversation in schools is what's gonna get cut this year type
Right.
of, you know, it's insane. So like the less you could spend on supplies, which I think that's what's really intimidating, especially with robotics. Like programming could get a little less intimidating because a lot of that could be like people are going to have laptops. People, it's mostly just getting the licenses for the programs and like IDEs and all that kind of stuff for students. But robotics can be a little intimidating because it's like, well, do we have a space for that? Like, and a lot of high schools have that opportunity because wood shop, if you could at least like integrate with like a wood shop or something, or like an auto body shop, that's definitely doable. But it's just getting those supplies, like, and teaching people the safety around all of the components and everything like that. So
Yeah.
be a bit intense, a little bit of a learning curve and a cost thing to take on as a school. But if you can minimize those things, that's great, because then people
Yeah.
are way more willing to join and not be worried about having to pay some insane fee to
Right.
build robots or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Well,
I totally wrote down all of that because I'm like, go bother the school being like, you guys planning on teaching stuff soon? You gonna get a computer science teacher? Like, you should do it. Like, I love being in industry and being able to develop applications and stuff for Target, but that's also like my other, like, if teaching opportunity came along, I'm like, hey, without having to go back to school. I think that's probably one of the biggest
Yeah,
issues with that career path is it's like, oh, like I would love to teach. I'd love to, be able to branch out in that way career wise, but I don't want to have to go back to school and just start all
right.
over.
So I've got a thought or two for you. So one of them would be, we work with an entity called BDPA. It's Black Data Processing Associates. They use some space at Metropolitan State. And they have Saturday, they always have a need for Saturday instructors, right? You don't need a teaching certificate. You essentially just need to know what you're talking about, right? And they, and this is JavaScript. I'm trying to think what else I'm not all that versed in what they do. All I know is we are pretty impressed with what they do, and we're a partner because they're reaching, their goal is to reach students that typically don't get into this path, right? And come from urban settings, and they're well-behaved, good kids, but they just don't have those opportunities.
Yeah.
Right? And so McKenzie, there are places for you to kind of try that on.
Yeah.
And see if it's something. So if you're interested, you know where to find me.
Yeah. I wrote down your name, so I'll probably creep on you and be like,
Yeah.
hey.
Well, that and just, let's get hooked up on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm
Okay.
always hanging out on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I'll let you all enjoy your lunch. And Katie,
yeah.
I've got my one.